Good afternoon, folks, and welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Martha Snow, and I'm the Associate Director of Programs at the Urban Design Forum. I'm tuning in today from Chinatown, New York, where it is a balmy 32 degrees. So if you're in New York, I hope you're staying warm today. And we're really glad for you to join us today for an exciting conversation on bolder boulevards in Paris. In case you're new to the Urban Design Forum, we're an independent membership organization that mobilizes civic leaders to confront defining issues in the built environment. We empower professionals of diverse backgrounds, industries, and perspectives to shape a better future for all New Yorkers. We also investigate complex challenges in the built environment, study alternative approaches to cities around the world, and advance progressive strategies to build a more democratic city. So a big thanks for the continuing support of our fellows, board of directors, and directors circle. Today's presentation and discussion is a part of our Streets Ahead initiative. Over the past year, the forum has been exploring ways in which New York City can boldly transform city streets to support social distancing when COVID hit. And now we have a historic opportunity to take the best of what we saw streets could be used for and make changes that last beyond the crisis. We're building a brain trust of experts and advocates to dream up new possibilities for the future of streets through the lenses of climate, commerce, culture, care, and continuity. And this spring, we'll share a suite of new visions and mobilizing ideas for New Yorkers and work with the new city administration to shape more people-centered streets. So stay tuned for that. In our exploration, we also know that in New York, we don't always have all the answers. Cities around the world are making great strides to redesign and reprioritize their street space for children and neighborhoods, as we heard about several weeks ago in Barcelona, and take bold steps towards decarbonization, as we saw recently in Medellin. We have so much to learn from being in dialogue with leaders around the world. So today, we're thrilled to organize a conversation with three incredible leaders and visionaries in Paris and here in New York City. Paris has long been a thriving global city and a beacon for history, arts, and culture. And in the recent years, the city has also made landmark commitments to transform the city to meet the modern moment. Since her election in 2014, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo has made bold changes to the way the city is designed and planned, including dramatically expanding green space, restricting traffic to curb emissions, and more. And several years ago, as part of that effort, French designer PCA-Stream, in partnership with neighborhood group Champs-Elysees, made an ambitious proposal to re-enchant the world-famous Champs-Elysees as a verdant pedestrian corridor. So for today's event, we're really excited to be in conversation with French architect Philippe Chambereta, the founder of PCA-Stream. After Philippe's presentation, I'm excited to welcome invited New York City respondents to join our transatlantic exchange. We'll have Celine Armstrong, who is the Chief Development Officer of the Fifth Avenue Association, and James von Klemperer, who is the President and Design Principal of Kohn, Pedersen, Fox, and also a chair of the Board of Directors at the Urban Design Forum. So first, I'll introduce Philippe, and then I'll actually pass it over to Jamie briefly to share a little bit of framing and more introduction for our conversation today. So first of all, Philippe Chamberetta is the founder of PCA-Stream, a research and architectural creation agency based in Paris, France, characterized by the synergy between thinking and doing. PCA-Stream was invited by the Comité Champs-Elysees to submit a proposal for a new vision of the historic Champs-Elysees, which we'll hear more about today. So now I'd actually love to pass it over to James, just to briefly share a few words of welcome to Philippe and to frame our conversation today. So Jamie, I'd like to welcome you on screen. Jamie, if you're able to turn on your camera and mic.
There we go. It takes a second to do that.
No
still
problem.
working on the video. It says disabled, but I can go without video. Okay, here we go. So yeah, thank you very much, Martha, and thank you, Philippe and Celine for doing this today. Should be a great topic. I just want to say a few more words about Philippe and then about the topic at hand, and then after a minute or so, hand it over. So first of all, Philippe, I have worked with tangentially, having to do with some of his work at La Défense, a great tower known as the Link Tower, which is really not only a piece of architecture, but a kind of investigation into the way technology and the workplace can interact in high density buildings. So fascinating project if you have the chance to look at it. I think also we admire Philippe's interdisciplinary approach, bringing a background not only of studies of architecture, but also studies of business and work in the business field, I believe at Booz Allen, which will figure a little bit today in this discussion of how not only the physical environment, but the activities of commerce can influence public space. So let me just talk for 30 seconds or so about streets, the great streets of the world. And Martha, I had a few images if you could flash up. And this is just to say that, of course, the Champs-Elysees is something of a national avenue or an international avenue, a great paradigm. But there are many others around the world that, as Philippe is speaking and afterwards, perhaps we can delve into some discussions and comparisons to other great avenues, Unter den Linden in Berlin, Sejong Road, and sort of national axis in Seoul, Avenida de la Reforma in Mexico City, where some similar challenges of moving from the kind of ceremonial and infrastructural towards the participatory linear park. They're initiatives really worldwide, each a different one, because each of these avenues has, next please, a different dimension, both of length, as we see here, or next, the last little slide, of width, of places for not only the automobile or bicycles, but for rest, relaxation, interaction, pop-up functions, etc. So with this backdrop of the great variety of arteries of the world, the kind of thing that the Urban Design Forum dedicates itself to the study of, and also the progressive attitude of change that we can bring through our skills as designers. With that, let me hand it over to Philippe.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie, for those framing remarks, and welcome, Philippe. We're really excited to hear from you today.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Martha. And I want to say I'm very pleased and excited to be able to share this presentation with New Yorker, because I've been a previous New Yorker in the past of my life, and I love your city. So I'm glad that I can share with you this information and this research. So in a few words, what I'm going to share with you is a very original initiative that was taken in Paris in the following what you maybe have heard of, launched by Anne Hidalgo about the Reinventing Paris, that turned into Reinventing Cities, where they try to propose a different way to produce a new project in the city, mixing private, public, and creative sectors. 3 years ago, before the pandemic, the Comité Champs-Elysees, that is an association of investor owners and retailers, already 100 years old, asked us if we were interested to work on how to re-enchant the Champs-Elysees. So the Champs-Elysees, if you look at the size of this avenue you see on the background, the Arc de Triomphe and the Place de la Concorde on the right of the screen. And you see this avenue is about 2 kilometers long. And so we had this this analysis of superposing it with Broadway, and you see that the length of the Champs-Elysees, it's about going from 37th Street to Times Square, 54th Street. So that's helping you to give a dimension of this avenue.
Philippe, apologies for interrupting. It does seem like you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me try again. I'm sorry, because then it's going to be much more efficient.
There we go.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Just want to make sure we get to see all your beautiful visuals.
Okay. Yeah, that is actually matching very well with the presentation that Jamie just did. You see here the correspondence between the Champs-Elysees and Broadway, giving you the scale we are talking about. What we've done is we worked for 2 years on understanding the story of that avenue. That is probably one of the most famous in the world. Maybe Broadway could compete with in terms of world fame. But the Champs-Elysees certainly has a very long history as an example of urban planning in Paris. But the work we have presented in the Pavillon de l'Arsenal, which is like the museum of urban planning in Paris, back in 2021. 20, that actually just started when the COVID hit the Paris and the world, and the exhibition was closed, was an attempt to understand how we could use this example to heal the city of Paris and the avenue, taking a little bit the reference of what medicine used to be 300 years ago, when the Champs-Elysees were first designed. That's how medicine looked like. That's how it looked today. And we say, okay, cities in a way are like complex metabolism, like living organism. And we know they have different type of metabolism, but all together, they are participating to what we call today the Anthropocene or the Urbanocene. That is, that these cities are working like viruses that are completely attacking the health of the general planet. And so we decided to say, what if we change our approach and look more in urban planning as the way to understand the life in its complexity of a city. So we say, let's try to look at it as in its complexity of different stack, using a classical framework of saying, start with nature, infrastructure, built environment, different uses in this built environment, and then the mobility going around. Most of the time, this layer are treated and managed and studied in separate silos. It is very rare that the interaction between the different stack are documented and studied and quantified. So our approach, our conceptual framework, sorry, this is a little bit complicated to follow, but it's just precisely to express how complex it is. If you have goals on the left side, what are the objectives we wanted to achieve on the Champs-Elysees, but are general to any kind of avenue, even any city. We want to have tomorrow a city that is more sustainable, more desirable, because we will see that the French people and the Parisian especially don't go anymore on the Champs-Elysees, and more inclusive. More inclusive, that means that it doesn't become a luxury avenue only for tourists and for shopping, but it stays something that is part of Parisian life. And so these three objectives, in a way, can be shared with many avenues. So we say maybe we can go in detail of what does it means. Like sustainability means restoring living ecosystem, carbon neutrality, and of course there are more indicators, more elements following the knowledge we have today about sustainability. But then we go in more detail and try to define some KPI to say how can we measure the current state and the future state. And on the right side, we have our toolbox of layers in which we try to indicate and see the connection that you have with any action inside the mobility toolbox, for instance, how it affects all of this aspect of sustainability, desirability, etc. That's I don't have time to go in detail, but it's pretty straightforward, conceptually at least. We will say then maybe if we have this objective, we take some action, and then we can measure in time how effective this sort of treatment are, and then do through a test and learn a corrective action to implement the research for our vaccine, in a way, vaccine. So that was the general idea. Then we presented, we went into a story of the Champs-Elysees, trying to understand why it was in a way interesting to try to re-enchant it, and why was it enchanted at first. The Champs-Elysees, a little bit of history, were designed in 1670 by Le Notre at the request of the King Louis XIV at that time. The Paris was then enclosed in a wall, and outside of this wall, you had the countryside. Back in the 17th century, French Empire became so strong that they no longer defend Paris, but so the king decided to open the city to the garden and demolish the wall, and he asked Le Notre to draw this line in the landscape, in the forest, that was just the extension of the Central Allée of the Jardin des Tuileries. This simple gesture, we like to connect it to what was Descartes and Bacon at that time in Europe was starting to build as the beginning of the philosophical modernity. This idea that man should become master of nature through rationality and try to dominate nature. That's where it started, and we can say that this is how science began, technology, and then industry, and then all what follow, and that led us today to this situation. So in a way, we like to pose this question on the Champs-Elysees as a way to work back on the roots of something that happened, which is the current situation, and say re-enchanting the Champs-Elysees is maybe a way to come back to what it used to be, and that is no longer is. So a look at modernity, and of course, beyond post-modernity. So in the beginning, the Champs-Elysees were a very nice place where Parisian would go for resting and have a nice time. You see in this painting of Watteau. It became quickly a very symbolic avenue where all the kings and emperor decided to express their power. It was then the Place de la Concorde became first Place Louis XV, then Louis XVI got decapitated during the revolution on this piazza. And then along the time, everything that something important was appearing in France or in Paris, that's where it was first implemented. For instance, the first electric street lighting took place on the Place de la Concorde. In 1855, we have a very long story. I tried to make it very short. First World Exhibition in Paris took place in 1855, and with the Palais of Industry in the Champs-Elysees, you see the Champs-Elysees garden. The car then 50 years later that then appear at the turn of the century slowly replace the horses and carriage, and the avenue of the Champs-Elysees became the showcase, the show window of the car. First subway in Paris, line 1, was following the Champs-Elysees. 1900, also the Second World Expo in Paris, where they created and built the Grand Palais and the Petit Palais, also took place on the Champs-Elysees. We're entering the 20th century, and we see that in this garden at the bottom of the Champs-Elysees, it still was a very lively place with a lot of families and kids, like in the Jardin de Luxembourg today. The avenue was still very popular. You see the picture of the 60s, where Parisians are still very numerous on the terraces. I don't know I hope you can see this small animation we did, taking all this drawing from the back in history and today, and how all this happened, summarized in this movie. You see slowly at the turn at middle of the 19th century with Haussmann, how suddenly it all got artificialized. And actually in the 20th century, it's only small modification, but everything was already frozen. And we see this very impressive movement of urbanization of this avenue. So what happened then in the 70s is that slowly, right at the turn of the 60s and 70s, things start to change. The Champs-Elysees became a place that was more conservative, more commercial, and the youth start to move on the East Bank, And you see a manifestation, a protest in 72 with young people saying that the car should be banned from the city and given to the bicycle. Then you have in 72 also the first McDonald's arriving in France on the Champs-Elysees. Then you have the RER, which is the regional transportation that brings all the suburb to the Champs-Elysees. And that, of course, is going to change the sociology of the avenue. That will then go from a nice movie theater to more, popular like a megastore, like the Virgin megastore in 1988. And then if you look at today, when the question was asked to us how to reenchant this avenue, this is the situation today. You have a very heterogeneous, ambiance on the avenue, going from fast food to a typical tourist store, and at the same time Louis Vuitton and Christian Dior. So it's like a very awkward, and the quality of the street is not so good anymore. Then we interview the Parisian to know what is their opinion. And we could prove that 40% of Parisians, especially in the center of Paris, have a bad opinion of the Champs-Elysees. Also asking what is the image. They say it's too touristic, too noisy, too artificial, stressful, dangerous. So a place where you definitely don't want to go. And when you look at what it used to be, like a green, peaceful, and avant-garde avenue, I mean, it's completely gone. I mean, only 2% of people have this image. And when you look at the figure of who are the 100,000 people on average walking on the Champs-Elysees, we could prove that 70% of them, like using the telephone information data, you see the 70% were tourists, 56% of foreign tourists. And that, of course, was in 2019, so before the COVID pandemic. The figure would be completely different today for the moment. But only 5% at that time were Parisian. So that is proving how much this rejection of this avenue is strong. Why? Then we say, okay, that's what we can measure. How can we explain? First, it became a urban highway. You see that here on the traffic density, that in red, of course, is the one of the most intense traffic on the Champs-Elysees. In terms of volume, it's also incredibly noisy. In terms of pollution, it's very polluted. In terms of heat island, you see it's not such a fresh avenue. Even the garden are not so cool compared to other park in Paris. And what we discovered during this study, which was a real sort of scientific discovery using data, is that this garden in the bottom of the Champs-Elysees, next to the Tuileries Garden and by the Seine River, are completely empty. I mean, it's what we call an hypervoid. That means that it's incredibly, it's 5 times less frequented than a smaller park like Parc Monceau, which is 3 times smaller. So incredibly empty. When we consider that Paris is a very mineral city, it's completely incredible that there is this missed opportunity right at the center. So what do we propose? Basically, we took action, or proposed action on all the level of on the stack we identified. That is existing Arc de Triomphe. That's what we propose for the Place de l'Étoile tomorrow. You can see, I mean, at the same time, greening the piazza around, and even at the center, reducing the number of lanes, and also improving the quality of the pedestrian experience around the Arc de Triomphe. The same thing on the avenue, where we will see in more detail, like creating some piazza for selfie, because today it's like very dangerous. On the avenue, improving also the trees and the plants on the soil, reducing the number of lanes to 2 on each direction instead of 4 as today, and giving back more room to the pedestrian. We study, of course, the traffic to prove that this was possible. Before and after, I'm going quick. We work also very much as the nature as a system, as an ecosystem, to understand how, by letting the water go inside the soil, and of course at night, evapotranspiration is then reducing the temperature. I mean, how this recooling effect is working is completely absent from the Champs-Elysees today. Then we propose new use also to on the public space with new terraces, new garden, new place to sit, and new retail. On the Place de l'Étoile, which is Place de la Concorde, which is today a completely mineral piazza. I mean, it's a total disaster. When you look at that, it's an historical piazza, one of the most beautiful in Paris, and it's just given to the car. So this is what we propose, is to ban it from the car from the center of the piazza, force them to go around it, green the center of the piazza, and make the transition by walking from the Garden des Tuileries to the Garden des Champs-Elysees. So to do this easy connection. Why? How do we do that? By reducing the number of lanes, banning the center of the piazza, and that of course has to be documented, and we work with some engineers, traffic engineers, to prove it was possible. Then we could imagine that today no one is crossing, and tomorrow maybe then we'll have part of the 14 million people being on every year on the Tuileries Garden crossing the piazza, offering a green space that will help refining in a way something that was existing back in the 19th century with the were trees on the Place de la Concorde. So today it's a really, it's a very hot spot. It's just like a furnace, something very, very hot, and then tomorrow maybe having something fresher. Then also we propose some transformation of the garden that are 27 hectares, for instance. This highway that is coming up right here, turning it into a garden by leaving the car below on a tunnel. Here you see on the bottom of the Champs-Elysees creating this restaurant and giving more room to the bicycle and to the pedestrian, offering like a series of innovative restaurants for everyone with creative and bio food, and also teaching people how to eat better, good for the health and the health of the planet as well, reducing the car inside of the garden to the minimum. They're of course proving that it works, working on the gardening itself, because the existing garden was planted in the 19th century as a colonial garden, and this is not what is going to work in 2050 with the climate change. Also, this can help to reduce the heat factor in the garden. And we propose 4 major axes of reoccupying the public space in this garden, 1 being culture, 2 being food, especially, I mean, both being very Parisian and French, and then sport and facility for the children. So we want the family to come back in this garden. Today it's empty, maybe tomorrow it's more crowded. The interest of that is also that you can connect the Jardin des Tuileries with the Champs-Elysees and the Invalides. That is suddenly becoming an 80-hectare park in the center of Paris. So that could be our central park with the Seine River in the middle. The conclusion is that actually this study was very well received by the city of Paris, that were not part of the process. They just discovered it. And Anne Hidalgo, once she was reelected, decided that she wanted to implement this plan. And we are now working on a new phase of study financed by all these private investors, some being from Norway, some being French, some also American fund, or even Qatari company that all have some stake about the Champs-Elysees, to work for 1.5 years on the feasibility study of this vision. And then we will offer to the city of Paris so the public realm can implement that vision, and maybe some of the private sector will participate in its financing. And I think I've been a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but I'm done and ready to answer question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Philippe, for the amazing overview and walking us through your proposal. It's really inspiring to see just the breadth of the vision that you have put forth. And you're welcome to, perfect, stop sharing your screen, perfect. Yeah. Just the breadth of the vision. I'm really excited to dig into some of the design ideas and how we might get it done. So first, before we bring on our wonderful respondents, I did want to propose one question to you, Philippe. And that's the question about, designing for many uses. So I loved the conceptual framework that you mentioned about the metabolism city that you're, listing. You're including nature and mobility and people and buildings and below ground infrastructure. How did you think about prioritizing uses for the space of the Champs-Elysees, recognizing that there are so many uses for the space and so much to incorporate into this landmark space?
Well, of course, you have use that are around the Champs-Elysees. So mostly today on the top of the Champs-Elysees, there are less than 100 people, inhabitants, living on the Champs-Elysees. So imagine on a kilometer long on the part that is built, only 80 people living there. So it became retail and offices. But on the street next to it, that's why I was interested. I show you this superposition with Broadway, is that it goes 1 or 2 blocks on each side that is still part of the Champs-Elysees influence, right? So there is some research that we have not shown today, but that could be like strategic urban planning with the city to say how you can influence the way this neighborhood are actually combined of several neighborhood with sub area. Like you in New York, I'm always very impressed by the way you gave names to Tribeca, Chelsea, Soho, NoHo. That's something that the entire world know about this area. That doesn't exist around the Champs-Elysees. So one of the ideas was to say, well, let's try to specify and maybe be able to brand some specific area based on their architecture, based also on the population and their different usage. So some are more like one of the area we see a lot of embassy, some are more headquarters. One is like Avenue Montaigne, is very luxury oriented. So it's actually the city has built different sub-world and specificity. On the Champs-Elysees, then the way you can influence the use is okay. We used to be something very attractive because you had a lot of culture, a lot of movie theater. That's where all the movie production used to be on the Champs-Elysees, and the theater you would always go there if you want to have a nice, projection. Today, it's all gone. So the question is it hard? Can you influence that? Can you finance or impose that some new function, more cultural, are coming to the Champs-Elysees? It's a general question between private and public, I think, quite interesting. But in the garden itself, there it's easier to propose something because there is nothing, it's empty. It's you have a big museum like Grand Palais, Petit Palais, you have also the Orangerie and the Jeux de Pommes, so it's all there. And actually, there is a void between them. So we spoke with the presidents of this different museum, and they're all very excited with the idea to invent a joint program, an outdoor program. And that, of course, after the COVID, it was much more even obvious that the culture could be outside.
Thanks, Philippe. I'm really appreciating just hearing the collaborations and the outreach that you did to stakeholders in the neighborhood to really understand what is needed for this space now. So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to actually now welcome our wonderful respondents on screen now. So if Celine and Jamie would mind joining me, I want to quickly introduce you two and the incredible work that you've both been leading. And then I'll pass it to you. I've got some questions for you and excited to dig into the conversation. So first up, I'm excited to welcome Celine Armstrong, who is the Chief Development Officer at the Fifth Avenue Association here in New York. And Celine also recently served as Executive Project Manager of Little Island, leading the design and construction of the $250 million public park pier built in the Hudson River. So Celine, we're really excited to have you within the New York perspective and share your ideas here. I'm also excited to welcome again James von Klemperer, who we heard from a little bit earlier, who's the President and Design Principal of International international architecture firm Kohn, Pedersen, Fox, where a major focus of James's work has been to heighten the role that large buildings play in urban space with projects like Shanghai's Jing On Kerry Center, Seoul's Lot World Tower, and New York's One Vanderbilt. And as I mentioned earlier, James is also the chair of the board of directors of the Urban Design Forum. So really excited to have both of you join this discussion. So let's get into it. Jamie, I thought maybe first I would pose a question to you. So as an architect and a designer, you're working on innovative projects in many cities around the world. Seeing this proposal, I'd be curious to hear from you, what do you see as design's role in really kind of rebuilding a true city center in places like the Champs-Elysees?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Philippe, very compelling presentation, and gives us a vision of something which really we think should happen to make a great avenue into a linear park of many expanded functions, good for health and good for urban life in general. And at the same time, it seems tremendously ambitious, like any good change. But I applaud and appreciate the fact that here the architect is really the provocateur, that ideas which could come from sociologists, economists, government, and probably do politicians, all of the above, but that architecture or delineation of space can become the kind of agent which moves the needle, so to speak, on our conception of what one of the nation, in the case of France, most important spaces can be. So, I work primarily as a maker of buildings, objects, but always realizing that probably the most important thing for large projects of architecture is a space outside the building. And so inevitably, we also come around the world up against or in contact with these huge thoroughfares that I mentioned in the beginning. Some of the examples with which we've been trying to work recently of Sejong Row in Seoul, or of Avenida La Reforma in Mexico City, or an Orchard Road in Singapore. We were asked to come up with some schemes that would allow for more pedestrian links between two sides of a great boulevard, so wide that it's practically impassable. So I think the power of design to at least provide a vision, and I appreciated, Philippe, when you began with the historical views, because they're the vision and what came of the vision, whether it was Osman or Watteau, or the micro or the macro, but it sort of captured the imagination, and we can imagine then proposals for the future coming to bear. I think that the stories of avenues that have undergone positive change, even maybe a little further back than the last 5 or 10 years, are really inspiring to us and good to keep in mind. I think of Omotesando in Tokyo, which is really a religious promenade to go to the Meiji Shrine, but then it became a very heavily trafficked road. In time, the kind of invasion of the road by green and pedestrian zone has made it now into a thoroughly sort of participatory place. And I have some questions for you. Maybe I'll wait on those till Celine it tells us a little bit about some issues in New York. But let's get into the Q&A afterwards, and look forward to that.
Thanks, Jamie, and appreciating bringing in additional international perspectives and ways that we're really thinking about global cities across the world here. Celine, I'd love to turn it over to you. So you've led these complex, large-scale public projects in New York, like Little Island, and you now have a new role as the Chief Development Officer of the Fifth Avenue Association. I'm curious to hear from you both your reactions to this proposal. What is most exciting to you? And also, if you can tell us a little bit about your kind of broad goals with Fifth Avenue and the types of lessons from this work that you'd like to bring to New York.
Sure. So thank you for having me. And yes, I love big ideas and to actually understand the complexity and the puzzle behind it to implement it. And, while I was building Little Island, 5 years of that time was spent working with the AIA's Planning and Urban Design Committee as the chair for Future Streets, where we would have these provocative ideas to show DOT and city elected officials what could be of our streets. And then due to COVID, people started reclaiming their streets, right? Like they're like, we need open space. We want to be here. This is our land too. And so I knew my next project needed to be prioritizing the pedestrian somewhere in New York. I had like certain neighborhoods identified, but they were already on their way. Fifth Avenue had reached out to me, and actually the inspiration behind the project is the Champs-Elysees, which is like one of my favorite streets. 10 years ago in Paris, wandering around, I'm that nerd that like sketches the streetscape, trying to understand how all the people interact with the spaces around that's created because of the building. So it's the space between the buildings that gets me excited. And I was like, okay, so there is some big ambition here, and New York understands the importance and has a mechanism to create better spaces for people, right? In the early 1900s, New York City changed to become, like, I think there's an ad in the New York Times for Fifth Avenue, the best driveway in New York City. Let's give that sidewalk space back. So the sidewalks used to be 30 feet, and then they got narrowed to 22. There are very few street trees. They're just the buildings along Upper Fifth. So this is from 46th to 61st are gems, right? They're like quintessential New York, but the public realm is awful. And I haven't dived into the history of to why there aren't trees along Fifth Avenue, but I assume it has something to do with just the priority of the car and retail. And our goal is essentially, even though the jurisdiction is 46th Street to 61st, this is DOT land, right? It's not of the association. However, the goal is to create that green ribbon that connects parks. So Bryant Park to Central Park, how can we have that better promenade? And our goal is to widen the sidewalks and then also create this continuous walking surface north and south. So you don't step into the roadbed, right? It's like the raised curbs or the raised intersections, that you've read about in the papers recently. And it's to create that environment where the pedestrian is respected and prioritized. And even if you're in a car, that you've now entered a realm where all modes of transportation are respected, but the pedestrian is prioritized. And that is what we want to be about, and to create that outdoor atmosphere where people can thrive. People need green space, and there just aren't enough studies that have been published to quantify that, to show why you should pay for it. And so I do have some questions about this project in particular, because it's so magical and such a big vision. And so we hope to work together on gaining consensus that yes, we need to do this in New York.
Thank you, Celine. And go ahead, Philippe.
No, I just say, if there is anything I can do to help you on bringing that to New York, I'll be more than pleased.
Wonderful. And I saw someone had a comment about the 25 by 25 plan, and that's the goal. If you just look at the car space, pedestrian space, we're giving like 74% back to the people, which would be, incredible and not an easy feat. But I only do big projects that have incredible impact, and I want to figure out how to figure this out. And I look forward to working with everyone who is interested in, even like the sustainability metrics that we can be using along the avenue. Like, can this be the case study for a better street and a better avenue for New York?
Awesome. And Philippe, I think this segues perfectly into where I was hoping we could go next, which is getting into some of the great questions that are coming in through the audience chat, which is really how might we make this happen? So a couple questions I'm seeing are, things like how might the city of Paris pay for this? How is the private sector participating? So really, I'd love to hear from you, Philippe, first, and then maybe head to Celine and Jamie to hear your experiences with things like public-private partnerships and getting these types of projects over the finish line. But first, Philippe, to you, I'd love to hear a little bit. How do you think this project can come to fruition? How is city government involved so far? And where do you see it headed?
Well, as I was saying, I mean, initially 3 years ago, it was something really spontaneous where the city had nothing to do with it. And then I like a TED talk in Paris, in the Petit Palais, where some television were there. And then the mayor asked me to go explain to her what I was talking about on the Champs-Elysees. Then she did say, well, that's great, do this exhibition. And she invited me to turn that into an exhibition. So, so far it was still like, pure, but I mean, it was not, we didn't take that as only as an architectural work. I must say that very from the beginning, that's maybe my scientific background and management consulting background before. I wanted to make it much more as a general process, and not only a design, not only a drawing, because actually all the objectives that we have below, like making the city more sustainable and more desirable at the same time. I mean, it's nice as a literature and as word, but then how you can measure really what it is, the cost of non-sustainability, then to be able to measure the value of the investment you will have to do is something that quantification can easily facilitate. And so we work with a lot of experts. We work with MIT Media Lab, the City Science Department at MIT, and a very Aarhus University and experts. So it's not only a design work, and I want to insist on that. So regarding the future, how this will be invested, we evaluate about 250 to 30 to 300 million euro, or let's say dollars is more or less the same thing as a cost, which may look a lot, but also not a lot if you compare it to the value of the real estate that is along the Champs-Elysees. That is something we evaluated more than 30 to 40 billion dollars, the different buildings. So we happen to have transformed one big building on the Champs-Elysees 5 years ago for the Qatari Investment Fund. And we knew it was valued about $1.5 billion, only one building. So you imagine there are 150 on each side. I mean, so it's worth a lot. So then if you compare this 40 billion to 250 million, and that's the discussion we have with the investor and the owner of this building, if the improvement of the quality of the surrounding, because most of this are occupied by offices, and that the tenants that the people today, and you live that in New York, attracting the employee back to the office is a real challenge. I think even more in New York than in Paris, but we also are faced with that. So, and of course, that is questioning today the value of office space. So it's a chain of value, which is, threatening a lot of people now around the world. I mean, what if people don't go? What if there are no more offices? Then some people that have invested in that are very conscious. So the fact that you create an environment, a building first, good new design office space, and James was mentioning what we're doing in La Défense with the new tower, which is going to be the tallest tower in France, but completely different design, so that you have outdoor, that you have terraces and garden inside the tower. And then if you also work on the surrounding, that when you go out of your building, it's not a highway, but it's a nice area where you have all the public amenities and facilities for food, for nature, and right next door. Then that's going to be improving the attractivity of your building, and then the value of it, etc. So as a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one. And then we could convince this 15 to 20 investor to look at that seriously, finance our research, and maybe tomorrow be part of the investor. The city of Paris is currently a little bit broke. To be frank, I mean, the economic situation is not that good. We moving on. We don't know if the Olympic Games that are taking place in Paris in 2024 may maybe improve that current situation for the city of Paris. And then if going along the way, because we are really inventing something that never happened before, if maybe this private investor may want to participate to 10, 20, 30% of this cost, we don't know. But we are in the beginning, when we ask them to finance the research, say, are you crazy? We are a real estate investor. I mean, we don't have any reason to pay for study on the public space. But slowly by slowly, it's a change of mind. Well, I'll tell you in the future how far we go.
I appreciate that, Philippe. And Celine, I'd love your thoughts here. Do you see any challenges or opportunities you see for public-private partnership in this case in Paris, or any experience from New York you think applies?
Yes, so I am a strong believer in the public-private partnership. And so while there's some distrust at the beginning, right, when private money, it's like, what's the hook, right? But at the end of the day, if you're building in the public realm, you're going to be building for the people. And it's going to be that much better because it's just could be elevated above basic city standards. And when there's so much for the city to maintain and to construct, it's difficult to create something that's so fantastic that you want to be there, or that you know that it's there, or that will provide the economic resources later. So for Fifth Avenue, we've had an economic study done that shows, over 10 years, it'll provide $3 billion for tax revenue. So investing in your public realm will bring people, and people will spend money. And the idea is, yes, we're struggling with office space in Midtown. What do we do with it? But the idea is, if we can create this public realm, that there's a there, right? It's not just a streetscape renovation. It's creating a place that people want to be. We will reinvigorate Fifth Avenue with office workers, tourists. Similarly, we don't have residential right up above, but there is, the people that you see people walking their dogs, therefore they live nearby, as well as reinvigorate Midtown, which will then help bring New York back. And so it's really critical to reinvest in your public open space, which is why I love the Paris example, because they are, instead of creating something new and sparkly somewhere else, which you do see in other cities, Miami has some amazing examples. How do we reinvest in something that we know is good, and something that can just like not save, I'm not saying it's going to save us, it's not going to save Midtown, but it'll come very close to saving this part of Midtown. And it's important to reinvest versus letting downward spirals happen when you just ignore your public realm, the buildings. Like, you've got to reinvest in order to reinvigorate the city.
Thank you, Celine. Yes, Philippe.
Yeah. Now, I think also what is important, Celine, is that we have to consider the power of example that places like the Champs-Elysees or the Fifth Avenue are for the rest of the world. And I think very much that, the way we can, work at the global scale is by multiplication of this kind of example that impress people's minds, say, hey, that's possible, why not us? And the Champs-Elysees approach, I mean, we were all completely astonished how the impact that we had when the mayor of Paris said that she was going to implement that vision. The week after, that subject was on the cover of magazine and all over the world. And we estimated that it was 2.5 billion people that have read about the Champs-Elysees just because of the Champs-Elysees. So you have also this responsibility with the Fifth Avenue because New York is also one of the very strong city in the world that everybody is, has in mind. And I'm amazed that you see the public space is very bad, and it's true. It was not for the pedestrian yet. It's one of the cities where people walk the more in New York. It's a very walkable city somehow also. And you go there, you never walk as much as in New York.
Right, and and I'm an avid cyclist and walker and love the city. And that's, you know, when I would have tourists come in and tell me like, let's go to Fifth Avenue, I'm like, oh, I'll walk you through Central Park and to the plaza, but you're on your own. I'll meet you at MoMA or at Paley Park. You know, there are gems, but I'm just so, I just think your public realm and your environment is so critical to your behavior and your mental health. And so when they reached out, I was like, let's see what we can do, because people want to be outdoors. They don't want to be in a mall. They don't want to be, you know, below grade. There's certain things that we know over time about how humans interact and what they, where they want to be. And so let's invest in that.
Thanks, Celine, and thanks, Philippe. Jamie, I'd love to pass it to you next. I know you have lots of great questions for Philippe. We've only got a few minutes left, but would love to make sure we get one in there.
Yeah, very quickly, I thought one of the most, and I agree with the idea that, you know, if we can see Fifth Avenue or Champs-Elysees as more of a place for health, then we all are desperately seeking health these days, to be outdoors, and, you know, outdoor spaces is the mantra of both buildings and the city itself. So, but I was intrigued by your talking about the line segment of Champs-Elysees, as we would see the line segment of Broadway or Fifth Avenue, potentially as a cluster of a sequence of different foci. I mean, maybe it's not quite as long as Broadway, so we wouldn't see, you know, 12 different neighborhoods. But it does bring up, I think, the question not only of spatial differentiation of a sub-portion of this zone near the Étoile, that zone near the Place de la Concorde or something else in between, but also the change of use over time, both micro time, day, night, spring, fall, winter, but also broader epochs of time where we see an evolution of city. And what I was wondering in your thinking, because I know you give a lot of thought to the way that technology influences space, technology influences the built environment, as well as being the sort of software that runs our lives, but wondering whether in the kind of assignment of uses along the line segment that changes all the time, whether technology and the phones that we carry and other means of communication are enablers of a different kind of, in a positive way, a different kind of urbanism that allows a better fully mixed use space. Because after all, an avenue is a place for parades, it's a place for commuting, it's a place for eating, it's, you know, just about everything under the sun. Literally, it's outdoors under the sun. But so I'm wondering about your employing thoughts about technology in the studies of the user and the sort of sociology of the street.
Okay. First, Jamie, I just want to remind that I show you the Champs-Elysees going to the Arc de Triomphe, but actually it's a historical axis that goes all the way to La Défense and way behind, because that was drawn in the 18th century, and it goes to Saint-Germain-en-Laye, so many kilometers. And so it's actually much longer. And today we are also going to work on Grande Armée, which is the other side of the Arc de Triomphe, and also the Avenue Charles de Gaulle crossing Neuilly, and also La Défense, which is also starting a process of re-enchanting itself also. So, I mean, the scope is even longer. Then about the question of your question on technology and urban planning, or the way people are, maybe the different use in technology, or the way it can affect the use of the public space. I mean, it's a complex and rich question, because one part is in the planning, and the analysis effect is something that is quite powerful to understand, study, understand, analyze. And coming back to the metaphor of the medicine, is really how you can scan and do an IRM of the health of the city and understand the behavior of people. That is not completely new, but you're probably familiar with some of the research that are done at MIT with their Cityscope using information about the pedestrian and understanding how they move in cities, how you have some cold areas where nobody is going there, and then you can have some action to make this connection more effective, creating some destination or work on local design so that one street becomes more attractive. Then suddenly you change the behavior. Then of course the fact that the relation to space is no longer only physical, but what you see, which has been the case in history forever. Now that the information that you have about what's happening outside of your visual, appreciation, because you know that there is something three doors later or 3 streets, thanks to Google and all the data and internet, of course, make is a total new world of being able to create a place, connection and activity in places that were completely remote before, or out of scale, just because the typical concentration of function and program in the medieval street, where you have everything was planned, that you have a street for shoemaker, a street for, because you knew physically that if you go there, that's where it's located. Now today you have this completely disconnection thanks to internet between space and awareness. So that is something that is opening possibilities. But then I think the last maybe remark I could say is that the next question that we're facing with this opposition between physical space and virtual space, so to speak, that we have now very aware with the COVID and the fact that you want to telework, and also Amazon, and the fact that then you don't have to go to a store and you don't have to go to a cinema to see a movie, but you see at home. That is, of course, creating a sort of opposition between the attractiveness of the public space and the artificial space, so to speak. And then we can be afraid with what's coming with the metaverse, which is going to be another level of competition between, and that is for us, designer of public space and architecture, it's a real question of how you re-enchant this experience of being in the real life, in real city with real people. And we can see that this is not a theoretical question today in the city.
Right. Well, I appreciate the fact that your study goes from the sort of data-generated research to something very physical, to an armature that, in a way, has a validity regardless of some of the varieties of life and technological use that will swarm around it. But we all start with something physical in the city. So I appreciate that very much.
And Philippe, I'm appreciating your vision to re-enchant Paris, and I hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation between Paris and New York, that we can continue this this discussion and this dialogue to re-enchant hopefully both of our cities. So unfortunately, we are out of time today, but I want to thank Philippe again for sharing your exciting work that PCA-Stream is leading in Paris. Yeah, we can do a virtual round of applause. It's one of the most inspiring cities I've visited, and is always encouraging other cities around the world to think more ambitiously and think more equitably about the public realm. So really, really grateful for your time. And I also want to thank our 2 inspiring leaders from New York for joining us, James von Klemperer and Celine Armstrong. Really appreciating your perspective and your visions for New York as well. And of course, I want to thank you all for tuning in, our fellows and friends, and for asking such thoughtful questions in the chat. Of course, we never have enough time, but we welcome continued dialogue over our social media channels or on our YouTube page, where you can find a recording after this. And of course, to my colleague and co-pilot, Guillermo Gomez, for his background technical support today. A few final thank yous to our fellows, board of directors, and director circle, again, for the continuous support of the Urban Design Forum. So this is our final event in our International Streets series. If you missed any of our conversations with Barcelona, Fortaleza, or Medellin, please make sure to take a look back on our YouTube channel to watch the recordings and to join the conversation. And keep an eye out for our Streets Ahead roundtables, which are launching in May. In the meantime, if you have projects or plans you'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us at the forum. Thank you again all for joining us today and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you to Philippe. Thank you, Celine. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And Marta and Celine, and as I was saying last conversation, I'm coming to New York in June to go to Philadelphia, and I'll be very pleased to meet you if you're interested, so we can continue a chat.
Thank you. Yeah,
here.
thank you, Philippe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'd love to. We can follow up over email. Thank you so much, Philippe.
Thank you.
Thank you.